What's up, Kingdom Dads? Welcome back. We are here for Season 2, Episode 2. Man, we promised this season that we are going to have a lot of life application, and we're back today with an awesome guest. We've got Tom Haddon from Northfield Church, our very own pastor here in Gallatin. Tom, what's up, my friend?
Hey, it's good to be here, Andrew. Good to be here, Nate.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Tom. Guys, just for those of you that don't know, Tom's our pastor of Northfield, as Andrew said, and Tom did an awesome sermon over Father's Day that was about disciplining your children, right? And I think it's so tough in today's time. You know, there's so many opinions on how you should just discipline your child that, you know, it's tough, especially when you're in a public environment. You know, even me as a young father, you know, I feel pretty confident, like I have a good hold on my son, but it's like, oh, am I being judged? Am I doing this right? Am I affecting him? And, you know, 20 years from now, he's going to have some kind of complex because I was too loud yelling at him or embarrassing him in front of somebody we don't know. You know, so it's tough with all the things that are out there. And so, you know, I think I'm glad that Tom's willing to come on and help us work through this a little bit. But I think it is important to know kind of what the Bible says about how you should discipline your children, and we should have confidence in that as Christian parents.
Yeah, no, at the Saturday after Tom gave that sermon, which I thought was an incredible sermon, I asked the men's group, I was like, guys, how many of you who listen to that sermon feel confident about the way that you are on a daily basis, the way you're disciplining, the way you're raising, the way you're parenting your kids? And every guy in the men's group with kids was like, I don't feel confident at all. I question it every single day. And I'm like, and that's why we're going to focus a lot on this kind of content during this season. So Tom mentioned the word exasperate, which is, you know, a word out of that we hear in the Bible in one particular verse, and so he's gonna just dive into relationship and what healthy relationship looks like with your kids, and some of that will include disciplining. So,
Well, you know, I think the first thing to remember when you talk about going back to your group and everybody feels inadequate, I think that's a normal feeling. I think everybody is a perfect parent until they have a child. And then you realize there are no perfect children, there are no perfect parents. And so I always like to start from the feeling that we're all on the same playing field, that we've all made mistakes, and that we all will mess up. Because the one thing that kids didn't come out with were instructions. And most of us have what we lived with growing up, as best as our parents were, and things change. And the one thing I love about God's Word is that it is very realistic. It shows the flaws of all its characters, of all its story, the people. It also shows the flaws of all the parents. You go all the way back to Adam and Eve, the very first parent, and you realize they didn't get it right all the time. And they listened to the wrong voice. And I look at my life, I listen to the wrong voice quite a bit. But if I know that I start there, that no parent is perfect, no dad is perfect, there are things that you've learned as you approach your sixth decade of life that maybe you wish you had known in your 20s and your 30s. And everything I have learned is nothing new with me. It's things that have gone on. And I've realized that parenting now is different than parenting even when my children were young and growing up. Parenting as a grandparent and the way I see my son and his wife have to parent, especially in the areas of technology. I would say because of technology that sexuality has entered into that, the way that we train up our children just with what they see and what they have access to. And I think the other thing that may be common, but it's coming more into play these days, are the busyness of our lives.
Yeah.
It's hard to parent when you're busy and when you're tired, and trying to make room for all that.
It definitely is. It's hard to build that relationship and really have that one-on-one time with your kids, you know. And I did a little clip about leading in VBS several weeks ago, and you know, I see so many children that just kind of lose their way or act out or are hard to control because obviously it's just. They just want a hug. They just want you to hold their hand and tell them they're doing a good job. And you know, even this morning with my son, as my son's wanting to play with trains as I'm on my way out the door, I'm trying to balance that feeling of like, buddy, I want to acknowledge you. You built an awesome train track. I want to play with you, but at the same time, it's like I got to get to work, you know. And so that is a tough thing to balance.
It is. There, a psychiatrist, I can't think of his name offhand now. I could get it if you want it. But one of the things I remember that he said is the perceived, it didn't even have to be real, but the perceived inaccessibility of parents was the number one leading factor he found in anger and hostility and anxiety in children. That if they didn't feel that someone was there who could help set boundaries, who could help set a standard for a way to go. And then as I was talking even before we started, one of the things I've noticed is that on the other end, because I find myself I wasn't always a pastor. I worked at, in the, I don't really call it the real world, because I think now this seems more like the real world because it's more real world problems. But business world versus church world, the things that come my way and the challenges that come, we tend to live in a world that wants to be experience rich with our kids. And that has come at the cost of relationships. We want our kids to have the experience of the team or the dance or the whatever it may be that's out there, and you pursue this goal. Yet every child, when I say every, I don't like to use the words always and never, but I would say the vast majority, the conversation never begins, we're here to talk to you today because I didn't make the team, or I didn't make the traveling thing, or I wasn't number one in this. Almost everything, when a child comes and there are challenges that they're facing, it has to do with the relationship. And that relationship goes back to three key ones: relationship with their Heavenly Father, relationship with their parents, or relationship with someone outside the home. So, on that Sunday you were talking about, I think one of the things I said was having a plan. One of the things was a plan for discipline. One of the things that we didn't talk about that day was a plan for their relationships. We don't always plan, because there are certain people, I think, in my child's life that I need to dial in a bit more. Yeah. And there are certain people that I need to dial out. And you got to be present to know who those influences are.
Absolutely. In talking about discipline, there's something you said that Sunday that I've probably thought about every week at some point. It's crossed my mind since that Father's Day sermon, but it's, I discipline my children because I love them, right? Like, you're not going to discipline something or someone you don't love. And so just tying those two things together, and I've heard, something similar along the way, but for some reason, the way you said it, it just stood out with me of I'm disciplining my son right now because I love him, right? I need him to listen to me because I love him, and at the same time, remembering that I am disciplining through love, not through anger, right? And so sometimes when I'm fired up about him, not listening, me having to count down from 3 at Walmart, whatever, right? Like, all right, why do I need him to listen to me right now? Is it because I look bad and I'm frustrated right now and I'm in a hurry? Or do I need him to listen to me because I love him and this is the path we've got to go down?
I think too, back to the time thing that you just mentioned, Tom, with busyness and experiences over relationship. I wonder if it's because this is something I notice regularly, and I wonder if it's harder now in today's, I don't know, with today's parenting model, with both parents working in so many homes. I feel like even this morning, right, I was on meetings at 8 a.m. until 9 a.m. Well, I had to get my kids to summer camp before my 8 a.m. started because my wife also has something at 8. Then we'll pick them up at the end of the day. A lot of evenings, there's something we could go do. Sometimes I'll intentionally skip the thing, even though we paid for it, because I know they just went from one childcare thing to the next. But man, it's the model now is just so different that a lot of times we do, and I catch myself thinking like, gosh, we're just going one thing to the next, and I haven't. It's been all just putting them in someone else's hands constantly, and I can't even imagine what a single parent deals with on that level, let alone most dual parent homes.
Yeah. Much less to take time to figure out what your child thought about it, right? Like, did you enjoy this activity? Did you enjoy what we did? Because sometimes it's just like, oh, you need the experience. You're going to be well-rounded.
The other thing I think too, we have this different pressure on us it's not maybe different pressure, but there's a different expectation for us to entertain our kids maybe now for some reason, where my wife and I talk about this, but if we do have just time at home, and the kids have to entertain themselves or go outside. I grew up riding a mini bike from 4 years old out in the woods. We lived out in the country. Like, I was never inside. My parents didn't even know where I was most of the time. And that's a whole nother story.
We'll have a podcast on that upcoming.
That's right. But But now it's very different. Like if my kids are home, there's almost this expectation of like, well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I don't go play. But today's kids, because they're entertained so much by all the different things that are in their face, tablets, all the different stimuli.
Yeah.
I feel like they are expecting entertainment.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not your entertainment.
I don't know. Just a quick derail. Andrew, I think you've done a great job with your kids on that. I feel like one of the last podcasts we were here recording, his daughter was out in the back selling snails. That was
That's
pretty
true.
solid. Collecting
That's true.
snails and selling them. So good job getting your daughter outside.
She sold Pierce 2 of them, which are still, what are their names?
Jenny and Johnny. We no longer have Jenny and Johnny.
What?
Johnny escaped.
Devastating.
He
R.I.P.
left the top open to get him some air. Johnny escaped, and we felt like Jenny needed
Willie
to go find
T,
some
he's
friends.
lying. Well, snails don't escape. No snails ever escape.
Hey. All right, back to the topic. Sorry to derail, but it is tough to really feel like you're pouring into your kids, and sometimes it is easy just to give them that tablet to be like, here, this will distract you, and maybe you'll notice that I don't have the time to spend with you right now. And so, back to something Tom said, I would love for us to dive into a plan for discipline and then a plan for relationships, just kind of sticking to that practical application. And so, let's start with that, Tom.
Well, I think to combat certain things, I think, especially with your first child, when we had Aaron, we felt a need to make sure everything he did was kind of in line. And by the time child 2 had come along, we realized, it really didn't take us long, even with Aaron. We've sat down and made a list. I would say Aaron is 3 or 4. And again, this wasn't original with us. This was something that we heard someone else say to do. What is it you want to discipline for? Because not everything has to be corrected.
Good.
If you end up correcting everything your child does, one thing you do is destroy creativity. And then you also help create the very thing you're after. You end up losing because your child really grows. They kind of have a distrust in themselves. And over time, that can lead to a distrust in you, that you're ever going to be satisfied with anything that they do. When they make something, you put it on your refrigerator. It doesn't have to be a Picasso. It is a Picasso to you. They come home with a report card and they have 3 A's and 2 B's, and it's so easy to focus on the 2 B's. Well, what happened there instead of talking about the 2 A's? So we sat down and tried to think, what are the things that we want to discipline to? We don't want to forever be known as those no parents. No, you can do this better. You can do that better. Well, let's show you how to do this. And not everything had to be a lesson either. We learned that pretty quickly, that while we wanted God to be number one in their lives, sometimes a sunset could just be a sunset, and it could just be something pretty to look at. And then there are sometimes to talk about the beauty of what God did. And there's sometimes just to have fun as a family. I think it's Solomon that says, have fun with your wife and the children of your youth. That there are those times that you just get together and there are no expectations, and they know dad and they know mom as someone that I liked being with and that I had fun with. And if you go through life thinking you have to correct everything and every decision and every word, I think that leads to low self-esteem in a child, because they end up thinking, I can't do anything right. And so what it does is it really snuffs out that creativity and that willingness or that desire to want to do something, because kids want to please their parents. Yeah. If you've got, the thing I remember the most is going to a swimming pool with my kids, and then this really played into every aspect of their life, but this is the one that stands out the most. Daddy watched me dive off the board. Daddy watched me come up. Daddy watched me swim, even when it wasn't even swimming. It was like, you were surviving. You were barely floating, but it was, Daddy watched me do that. They want to please their parents. And I think in those moments, you celebrate. If they made 1 stroke, you celebrate it. Figure out another way to get 2 strokes and then 3 strokes without it being a lesson. You can make a lesson without it being a lesson.
Yeah.
You can just back up a little bit in the pool. And
yeah, that's so good. I'm going to tell him myself here, because there's something I did last night with my son. So you've heard me talk about my son in train tracks. My son loves building train tracks, right? He's probably got like 75 foot of train tracks that live in our living room right now. And it's a bit ridiculous. But anyways, that's not the point. So yesterday, we had cleaned house, so all his train tracks were picked up. So he was having to build a new track. right? And so every time he starts building these tracks, he has this grand design. And so he just starts like laying down stuff and building, and he's so focused. Well, yesterday he wanted us to build together, so I'm going behind him because kind of there's male and female pieces, and pieces have to line up right so you have enough so they all connect, right? And so he's building this train track that he loves doing, and I'm going behind him seeing like, oh, we're going to run out of this type of piece, so you're not going to be able to finish your design. And so like I'm like correcting pieces and rearranging stuff just a little bit, not a ton, just a little bit behind him. And finally what I notice is I'm the one building the train tracks. He's done. And when I'm like, hey, buddy, come finish building your train tracks, he's like, I don't want to build anymore. I'm good.
He's like, bro, I've been eating Jell-O for the last 30 minutes.
Yeah, I completely overshadowed his fun. And, it was just a simple thing, right? Like, I wanted us to have enough pieces to complete it. But to your point that you just made, my son saw that as me saying, like, oh, you're not doing it good enough. Look, buddy, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
And it's just something so simple. And so, I mean, I think that we can do those things and not even realizing it, right? Not even as much as getting onto your child for his report card and saying, hey, you got 2 B's or a C, and ignoring the A's, but even just like simple stuff when we're trying to help them, sometimes we don't realize how that's coming across.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that. I think, and especially with daughters and their dads, right? We know daughters get a ton of their self-esteem, the majority of it from their father, and if they don't, then they're gonna seek it from another male figure a lot of times, and which is what you don't want. And so even what you said that Sunday around not turning everything into a lesson stuck with me. I think about it almost every day because I do that by default. Especially we get a lot of 5-year-old facts in our house where Eden will be like, oh, that's so-and-so. And I'm like, I think you learned that from your grandma. That's not actually true. You're just saying things. And hi, Mom. She listens. But anyway, and so I have stopped like, oh, I'm not going to correct every single thing my 5-year-old says because it just doesn't matter. Like there will be time in life to do that. But not only not doing that, but instilling, hey, did you see that you just did that right? Did you that's incredible? And continually voicing, and just building in that security of I am good, I am capable, I do good things, and it works for sure.
Yeah, we forget the steps of learning, especially when something's so simple like that, because we did it 30 years ago. I started to learn to write, and the stuff now that we just take for granted. Yeah, there's a time to build that, and so. Not that you have to analyze every little thing you're doing, but like at some point, be aware of how we're communicating with our children and how we're encouraging them, and then how we're disciplining them out of love or out of anger. And so I think I may have derailed from the discipline plan.
I think it's all part.
Derailed. Nate's all about the training. It's just next episode he will have on a conductor hat.
Actually, guys, this is how you do this
is how you put the truck together.
I don't know. But yeah, to jump back into the discipline plan.
Well, so we tried to think of what are the big things that we wanted to do, and we noticed that even back, we say it now that it's new, it's really not. I look back even at my growing up times, and I'm on the tail end of the Woodstock era. And I go back to some days that some of your listeners may have to look up and see what is that. But
Tanner's got his phone out right now, trying to figure it out.
There's always been kind of a model of kids go through where they challenge authority, and we wanted to try to avoid that as much as possible. So I think when we were looking at how to discipline our kids, we wanted them to see in us a standard that was fair for them. I think sometimes when they do challenge your authority as a parent or whatever, it's because maybe what you do doesn't make sense. The verse you were talking about is from Ephesians, where Paul looks and he says, fathers, but that could just as easily be translated as parents, do not exasperate your children, but train them up. Same things that Solomon says when he says train them up, that parenting is active. And so when you're thinking about training them up, you've got to be active in this, and there's a verbal part of what you want to do. But Solomon will say in the way they should go, Paul will say, do not exasperate your kids. Well, exasperate, I think the example I used is, I was with someone recently, and I saw them with their young son, and they were given a command. And it was almost as if, I want you to obey this just because I said so. And I think if you do it right, you can get that out of your kids where your kids respect you enough. But But if the only way your kids obey you is because you have size and influence, but because you have size and position over them, that only works for a little bit of time.
Yeah.
That when I think about, back even in the world I'm in now, which is the church leadership world, but when I was in the business leadership world, never had an employee that worked under my supervision, nor was I an employee that worked under someone else's supervision that I would have been satisfied with or liked the phrase because I said so. I realize in the military, there may be times you've got to do things because I said so. But if you can get an employee, whether that's you working under someone else or someone who works for you, to understand why they're doing something and the value that adds to the business or the family, then obedience is not something you generally have to enforce. It's something that they want to do because people generally have a desire to want to please who's over them or to do something correctly. So I've tried to learn exasperating your children. I think what Paul is talking about is expecting them to obey with no position or no place to go with that, no place to put it that seems fair or the why behind it. So there may be times in my life where, hey, I just need you to do this now, but trust me, Dad's going to tell you why in a bit. And if I have done that successfully in my life and remember to go back, then what I gain is influence, because size and position will work for a while, but it will not work with a 14, a 15, or a 16-year-old. Most 16-year-olds are already bigger than their dads now anyway. It may be the chicken. Y'all were talking about cutting chicken on one of your other episodes, or cutting meat with whatever.
Hormones.
The one thing you want is influence in the end. So you've got to work on the relationship in the beginning where they listen to you because of the relationship and not necessarily because of the position. You can start out there, but you got to quickly, in those early years, I would say before the age of 6, you've got to be transitioning from your children doing what you want them to do because you're bigger, you're better, or you're just your authority as a parent, to your influence as a parent. And as you go into that 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, you're transitioning to influence so that when they hit those teen years, they respect you.
That's good.
And they respect you because they know you're fair. You're a fair dad. You're a fair mom. You explain why. Things don't seem out of context because even, I think you were talking earlier about Pierce, even at his age, reasoning things out.
Yeah.
They can reason things out. Yeah. So I think when Paul says don't exasperate your children, I think he is saying, when he says bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, it's the way the Lord brings you up. He doesn't expect you at 30 years old to know everything you know at 60, or as a new Christian to know everything that one of their religious leaders would have known. Luke even says that Jesus grew in wisdom. He grew in stature. That means physically he grew up, but he grew in favor with God and people. And one of those relationships that I want to nurture with my child is my relationship with me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What I was thinking about, as you were talking, Tom, what a great picture of, like you said, of how God parents us and how he wants us to obey his commands as his children. He's not a dictating God or a hammer down type of God. And we see that even with fellow believers and even men that we counsel with, right? Around a lot of them who have walked away from God and his commandments in life have been a part of a community or a church or a parent that maybe dictator was legalistic or whatever, and they rebelled and walked away, just like our kids will at some point. It's like anything else. We have to establish that trust and that relationship first so that they willingly then hopefully make the right decisions most of the time to obey and to do the right thing.
Yeah. And then I don't even know, it's never too early to start, it feels like. I think my wife was really good at this early on of, if my son was mad about something or throwing a fit, in my mind, it's just like, he's 3 or 2 at this time. He's just throwing a fit, but she would go kneel down and she would explain it to him. And I'm in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, we got to go. We're running late for church. We're going to be pulling in the parking lot and Tom's going to be talking, and I'm like, just grab him. Let's go, and she's taking time to kneel down and explain the why. And kids do start to learn it from an early age, so I feel like you can't implement this stuff early enough, honestly.
You said the magic word, time. And busyness is the killer of having the time to do that. Getting your kids. I think one of the messages that I gave is Linda and I said early on we were not gonna have our children or our family involved in an activity that consistently kept us away from family and away from our church family. It just it put more demands on time to be here, where I didn't have time to kneel down and to get on their level. I think that's a key thing that you said your wife did as well, that I try at church. I don't always do it, but when the kids come through the halls, if they talk to me or say something, I try to kneel down on the floor where I'm looking at them and they can see me, and they don't see me as someone above them, but they see me as someone who's looking in their eyes, or, just being on their level with them where they're not, it's a crazy idea. There was a military guy who was we did one of these at church. They figured out that a lot of people who were confined to wheelchairs, one of the hardest parts about that was never being on the level with other people. So one of the Wounded Warrior in the Wounded Warrior project designed a wheelchair that would lift people up, and we've now bought 2 of those for different people in our community through our church family, that got them on the same level, where when they were talking with adults, that there was something about their self-esteem as a person and their self-worth when they were eye to eye with somebody. And I think the same thing is true with that with our kids. When we can get down and look at them, I think it shows something that we're interested in them and we want to be there. And I think it provides that influence again too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. So really good stuff with the plan for discipline, and I think we've overlapped a little bit with this, but moving into a plan for relationships is something you spoke about.
Oh, yeah. So, if I tie those 2 things together, the 2 big things that Linda and I came out with that we would discipline our children for really had to do with things that destroy relationships. One of those was disrespect. And disrespect for authority was a big one on there. And I think a lot of people who have disrespect of authority, they do that because they feel their leader isn't fair. And while life is not always going to be fair, because sometimes things aren't, the way that you discipline a son is a lot different, I figured out, than the way you discipline a daughter. Yeah. And then you could have 2 sons or 2 daughters, and the discipline is going to be totally different. So when I say fair, I think what I mean is more just, gotcha, where they come out away thinking that, well, that was right. So one of the things that we said that we're going to discipline for are those relationship destroying things. The first big one was disrespect, whether that's talking back and over. We wanted to have our kids where we're going to listen to each other. Even if I don't agree with you, I'm going to listen to you, and we're going to walk through, because there have been several times that my kids have changed my mind about something because I took the time to listen. Chuck Swindoll tells about a time that his little girl came to the office and was going to say something to him, and he was reading the paper, and she stopped and didn't say anything, and he said, "Go ahead, I'm listening." And she got behind the paper and pulled it down and looked at him and said, Then you have to put your paper down and look at me. And
I love that.
And it is that listening thing and because that's what you want out of them. I think even when you look at protests today, what do people say? They say, "I want to be heard. I want to be heard. I feel like I wasn't heard." Mm. I think if you provide an environment where with your kids where they can be heard in their environment, it doesn't mean as a parent that you're going to agree or that you can even do what they say. But man, I think the respect that it shows your kid that you're willing to listen and you're willing to even to consider something that may be out of your comfort zone. And sometimes it means that you may walk with them through an experience or something that you may not love yourself, but you're going to walk through with them to show them the respect. And those are usually in things that are neither right nor wrong, but it may not be what you want to do. It really goes back to what Solomon and Paul said when they both said train up. When Solomon says in the way they should go, I think our natural inclination is to train up our kids in the way we want them to go. And when I say that, I'm not talking about, because we all want the good behavior versus the bad behavior. That's when I say the way they should go. Every child has their own personality. My dad loved baseball. I loved my dad, and I think my dad loved me. But my dad didn't really know how to parent a young man who didn't have the love for baseball that he had. Instead of looking and being able to celebrate what I did do well, he wanted to discipline me in my age. And I tell you but one of the sweetest moments I had with my dad was before he passed away. And that was just, I'm about to get emotional. It's not been 2 years yet. And that he looked and he said, I wish I'd known some of these things that you talk about now. I wish I'd known them when you kids were growing up. So it's not a slam on anyone, but again, it's a learning experience. We take what we've learned from and we grow from that. How do I look at my daughter and I say, you may not have that ambition, I'm going to be the leader of the company person, but what do you do well? Can your children feel good about themselves in the way that God designed them to be? Because there are going to be some of our children who are going to be leaders of companies, and they're going to be leaders of people. And there are going to be other children who are leaders, but they're leaders behind the scene, and they're leaders who are not, they're not always seen. They're not the person out front, but wow, what they bring. I think about Sunday morning. Right now, you've got a tech person sitting over there doing what we couldn't do this without them doing that.
Absolutely.
And being able to celebrate that person that's behind the camera as much as the person that's in front of the camera. Because I may have a child that's in front of the camera, and if I'm a dad who likes to be in front of the camera, I may shoot for that. But what am I doing to build him up? Again, all of that plays into relationship and how it builds influence. Because if I can do that, I've transitioned from them listening to me because I have size and position, and they're listening to me now, hopefully because they respect me because I respect them as a person. And I want to train them in the person God made them to be. So I try to look at what are those ways that they shine in their life and celebrate those things.
That's awesome. We spent a lot of time in season 1 talking about breaking generational curses, right? And things, it could be, to the extreme. I think Andrew had a bit in his story, but even, with my story, I had great parents, but challenging pieces were still passed down from some anger and some other things that my father dealt with. And, I think that leads into something else you spoke about, right? The importance of a child's relationship with God and how early we start that, because us as parents, we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to be perfect. I've been frustrated and angry in front of my son, and I've showed a side to me that I would rather him not see. And if we're not willing to go back and admit to our children that, hey, that's not who I want to be, I made a mistake, and then also show that perfect example in God to our children, they're not really going to know how to handle themselves in some of these situations. They're just going to mirror what they've seen and what they've been taught as they grow up.
Yeah.
There, you told me you might end. We don't have to end here, but if I skip, you may want me to recommend a book later on. A book that meant a lot to me in my early years as a dad was, I can't think of his name, but I can get it. But the title of the book was How to Live with Your Kids When You've Lost Your Mind.
Okay.
And he talks about, and he spoke to large audiences of kids and would often have them write down things. And on one particular occasion, an audience of 5,000 kids had them write down, what are the things you most want to hear from your parents? And number one was what everybody expected, which was, I love you.
Yeah.
That was the number one answer. The number two answer was the most shocking answer that they wanted to hear from their parents, was a combination of either I'm sorry or I was wrong. That if a child can hear you, again, it goes back to no perfect parent, but oftentimes we act like we are because we don't want to admit our vulnerabilities. I've had to look at Aaron before and look and say, Dad was wrong there. I told our church family, I grew up in a church tradition that had some very strict ideas about things. And I remember telling our church family that I came to the point where I think we should look at the religious world and say, there's some things that our particular denomination that I grew up with got right. But there are some things that we need to look at the religious world and we need to say, we are sorry, there's some things that we definitely got wrong. And we made people feel less than because of that. And I think we can do that with our kids as well. We can We can make them feel less than by not being able to admit, hey, Dad failed there. And you know what that gets them to see? If they can see that Dad can forgive, I think it creates in this environment that they can be forgiven, because they're going to do the same thing. They're going to make a mistake. So one thing that God says we all have in common, we've all sinned. But how am I treated? And if they can see that Dad is willing to say he's sorry and the relationship wasn't damaged because of that, the relationship can be repaired. It doesn't have to stay broken. That they can believe that maybe their Heavenly Father can forgive them when they break the relationship or when they do something that you would not want them to do.
Yeah, man, that's really good. You catch me at some of these as you stop talking and wind down a point. I'm just thinking and I'm relating these points to my life. So I mean, I'm sitting here learning too. But man, that's
I love
great.
that we talked about, as Nate said earlier in season 1, was a lot about just teaching guys and empowering guys and helping guys to feel okay with being vulnerable. But a huge part of that, like we've talked about before, is, like you just said, with your kids. I know it's funny now because I've made a point to do that with both of my daughters, where I will say, if I overreact or if I misinterpreted a situation where they were maybe fighting, but they really weren't. They were just playing hard or whatever, and I get on them by mistake. And I will own that and apologize, and I'll say, can you forgive me, and move. But I've even said in the past, hey, like we're all working on things like we've talked about. We're working to get closer to God's character as we grow through our lives every day. And some days we screw up more than others, but we start fresh every day. And Eden will call out sometimes like, that's okay, Dad. I know your thing is you're just working to be more patient.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank
that's
you.
awesome.
Yes. You know me well.
Yes, that's great.
But again, it just gives them permission to not be perfect and to mess up and know that it's okay.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Because you don't want to set this example that can't be reached, right?
Yeah.
And if we're never asking for forgiveness or showing that we've messed up in front of our children, right? The example they're going to have is like, oh, I've got to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's tough to live up to. And so that book, and then there was one more book you were talking about before we started. It was about growing up too fast, or
yeah. Now it's been a long time since I've read it, and I believe the guy's name is Jonathan something, but it's called Too Old Too Soon.
Too Old Too Soon. Okay.
And there were. I remember a lot of takeaways from that, and it talks about how our kids, if you go back several generations, we often say, well, when I was your age, I would do this or that. Well, we were never, especially as a grandparent, I was never my grandson's age in my grandson's time. Mm-hmm. The things that he has, I was his age, but not his age in his age.
That's a good point.
And so what does that look like? I do that. I have to do that differently. So I think Too Old Too Soon. I'm going to go back and reread it again. Yeah. If it's a bad book, I apologize. Yeah, I know there was at least one good point I got out of it. Yeah. But the other one, How to Live with Your Kids When You've Lost Your Mind.
Okay, that's
was the other.
Awesome.
But I would say a takeaway from the discipline things that led to relation. The one was disrespect. The second one was dishonesty. I wanted to build trust. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth," because those are two relationship busting things in life. If an employer doesn't think they can trust you, and if a parent can't trust you, so we tried to instill with them that trust and being respectful of other people were the foundation blocks on which every relationship is built. And then what we did, if I summarize the relationship part of that very quickly, we nailed it down to 3 things. My kids, first of all, want a relationship with their Heavenly Father. What does that look like, and how can I get them to build that? We could do a whole segment just on that. Yeah. Number 2 is the relationship with me, which I think we've talked about probably more today than the other. The other is the second biggest, as your kids get school age, relationship with those outside the home. What does that look like? And how do I keep tabs on that? How do I keep a monitor on that? I think it's a pretty famous preacher now who used to say, your friends will determine the direction and quality of your life. Having the time to know who are my kids' friends are. One of the things I think that my mother did well, especially, and that because of the position my father took in the home, enabled her to do that, was we were the house everyone came to. Yep. And we tried to be that with Aaron. We tried our best to go out of our way if it had to. Sometimes that was money and sometimes that was time to open up our house to their friends, and that helped us keep a tab on because you hear things. You hear what they're talking about when they're upstairs. I don't want to give our teenagers, that parental insight there. But it is a way to say to your child, I'm trying to help you dial in the right people and dial out the other people.
That's definitely one thing somebody early on told us was I think my grandma told me that, be the house that your kids want and their friends want to come to. And it's, man, I mean, literally for that, like we've got a zip line across the backyard. We've got a boat we take the kids out on. And I'm like, I've got an umbrella policy through Defender Insurance for my zip line coverage.
Yes.
Thanks, Drew. But we try to set that up because I feel like that's one of the most critical pieces of parenting advice you can have is you just don't know what's going on in other homes unless you're incredibly close with the family. And it's just, man, a lot of benefits to that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Any other closing points on wrapping up? Either one of those two?
I would, if there's a third book, which really is the first book.
Yeah,
I wish that we could have these great insights into Scripture. There's one other Scripture. You've got the Solomon one, train up a child in the way they should go. You've also got Joshua that I think has been a leading verse in my life, where Joshua, we often think he says this on the beginning of his ministry, but he's not. They've conquered Jericho. They're into the promised land. And I believe Joshua's probably on his way out. He knows that my time is over. I'm turning over the next person. And he says things, Joshua 24, he says, choose this day whom you're going to serve. Then he makes because you got choices out there. We're going to influence our kids one way or the other. There is no neutrality in any of this parenting thing. We will influence them one way or the other. I think Joshua puts the nail on his head. He says, you got to choose today. So no matter if your child is 3 or if your child is 33, I think part of that choose today to start being the dad I wanted to be, the mom I wanted to be, the parent I wanted to be. I have figured out your adult kids need you as much as they needed you at 3. And I figured that out because I never grew out of that need to call mom or call dad or just run something by them.
Yeah.
That it is generational. So start where you are. But then he says, but as for me.
Yeah.
He doesn't say as for the nation of Israel or as for anyone else. He narrows it down and he says, as for me. And I like that Joshua brought it back to a personal level. I can't help what everybody else may do. He says, as for me. And then he says, as for me and my house. It wasn't, he wasn't saying that, I'm going to force them to do this. But he said, as for me, I'm choosing today. And I'm choosing how I'm going to be for my household. And I think if I could, that's what I've tried to model and live by. Not perfect, but it's been even at work, I try not to expect anyone to do anything I wouldn't do. So if I pull up on Sunday morning and I see trash in the ditch before I go in the building, after church, you're often likely to come and see trash on the front seat or the floorboard of my car because I will stop out there and get it because I'm not going to ask them to do something I wouldn't do.
Yeah.
And I don't want that I want them to see a dad who would walk with them through the garbage detail and through the mountaintop detail of life.
That's good. And you said something there that I want to leave the listeners with, but there's no neutrality in parenting. You're either going to lead them positively or lead them negatively.
Yeah.
So that's,
as we've said many times on this show, it's not a choice, guys.
No, it's not.
This is our mission and our commandment to.
Yes.
It's we got to be good dads and good husbands and lead well.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
And if you're not doing it yet, that's okay. It's a good time to start.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I'm looking forward to going back and listening to this episode. There's so many times where I caught myself like, I should write that down. That's so good. I'm going to apply that later. But man, thanks for being with us today, Tom.
Well, thank you for having me. You guys have made this easy.
Good.
I don't know if I've ever done a podcast before. So.
Well, nice. First one. Let's go.
So thank you for making it easy.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Well, we've got some great stuff coming up, guys. You remember Kathleen Edelman?
Oh, yes.
Yep, she'll be on the show, who wrote You Said This, I Heard That, talking about temperaments in your kids. So we've got several great topics coming up, guys. Really hope you'll stick with us through season 2. I know we're early on, but I think you're going to find some really incredible content. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You want to pray us out?
I'll do it.
All right.
Lord, thank you for this opportunity this morning. Thank you for speaking through Tom and allowing Tom to be here. Thank you for Andrew and Tanner, and Lord, thank you for blessing me and speaking through me. Lord, this topic about raising your children is so important, Lord. And so, I hope that you can touch the heart of our listeners out there through us and help open their eyes to the importance of leading their children and down your path. And so, Lord, be with us, be with the listeners as we go out of here today. And in your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. What's up, Kingdom Dads? Thank you guys so much for listening in and watching today's episode. We are live on YouTube, all the platforms, X, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
All of them.
All of them. So many now. Anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Like, subscribe.
Yeah, guys, gals, thanks for being here. As Andrew said, like, subscribe, comment, be part of this journey with us.
That's right. See you soon.